podcast and start streaming. And then verify that it is connected. And we are officially live on YouTube right now. And my name is...
Welcome.
My name is Zach, or Zach Baca.
Zach Baca. And I'm Steve Solo.
Today we are going to talk about right to repair with a focus on John Deere tractors.
Specifically because John Deere has been in the news as farmers sue them for monopoly and the inability to repair their own equipment.
And who doesn't love a good lawsuit against a massive corporation? I'm a fan.
Right, and this is coming on the heels of recent labor strikes.
Yes, and that didn't go too well for either party for a very long time. I do believe it was resolved, though. Do you?
Yeah, I do believe they won adequate concessions on that.
Yes, yeah. Last I had seen, basically, John Deere had said, "This is our final offer," and the union had said that's still not good enough, and that was the last I'd heard of it. But that was like 3 months ago, and I didn't have a whole lot of follow up on that particular thing.
No, because labor struggles are not often national news, for sure.
No, it's very difficult to find that. And specifically with John Deere, as it turns out, when you have a very small percent of the population actually farming, not a lot of people pay attention. And John Deere, despite being massive, is really only touching on the lives of a small percentage of our population.
Well, I don't know. I don't think I agree with that. I think that I think that large agricultural service companies most certainly have an effect on everybody, especially since like the resiliency of the system is affected, and that's really what these folks are suing them, is that they can't, like, they're not allowed to repair their stuff because some companies put like screws that no one has like a socket for or whatever.
Yes.
And you have to buy the proprietary socket, and they'll only like lease the use of it to like certain approved repair shops. It's basically that. And so what's happened with this like proprietary, whether it's software or hardware, they've only have licensed dealers can look at it. And what they've basically done is forced a lot of mom and pop repair shops out of business in favor of these consolidated like repair centers. And so farmers who should be in the business of working the land and tending the animals, etc., are now having to travel hours and hours and hours to get to a repair shop to get things fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's actually, it's really two-pronged with John Deere. Specifically, they have a lot of proprietary tools that they have designed. Rather than using off-the-shelf nuts and bolts and lugs and stuff like that, they have very oddly sized and shaped things. And then the entire set of tools, physical tools you would need, costs over $100,000 to buy. And then they've also basically attacked people with something called the Customer Service Advisor software, which costs over $2,000 and kind of only gives you a basic sense of what's wrong. Like, it'll point to the part that's wrong, but without experience or troubleshooting guides, you don't know necessarily what is wrong with that part. Like, you might know that it's an air sensor, but you don't know if it is that the air sensor is not connected at all, if the air sensor is bad, or, basically what all is wrong with it.
Right. And that's actually that article in Progressive Farmer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the one I sent you. You can
Yeah,
bring
let's
that
go
one
ahead and
up.
swap over to that real quick. All right, Progressive Farmer.
Here at the bottom, he says, we're not asking the software to jump the horsepower. We just want to know the software so when a sensor goes out, we know which one it is and we can fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, you know, and the reason that I really like this is a couple of reasons. A, like agricultural monopolies, but all monopolies like are bad, inherently bad, because under capitalism, they seek to accumulate. And so if they're permitted to claim, you know, proprietary privilege over their technology, then that's just another way that they can extract a profit out of people. And it's kind of like Microsoft getting rid of software at all and switching like as a good that you can purchase and switching to this like software as a service. So now you have no choice but to give them money all the time, and it's essentially rents, right? Like they've, instead of creating a product and selling it, which is the way the economy has been structured for a very long time, now they've become landlords over these technologies. And that's exactly what John Deere is doing, is that they're playing landlord. They're like, oh yeah, you can borrow this, like you can pretend you own it, you can pay the bank a lot of interest and pretend you own it, but really we are still renting it to you. And it's just this kind of, it fits within the general trend you know, over the last several decades through neoliberalization and financialization, is that like everything is just becoming concentrated, meaning ownership is becoming concentrated among a tiny, tiny, tiny elite. And then they loan us. We don't buy a tractor.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just pretend we buy a tractor, and then we're still at their mercy when it comes to ensuring that tractor is functional for us to do our job, you know, largely, you know, growing field crops.
Right. And when it comes to the repair, something they've said is that basically it's we're doing it for your own good. You know, we like you can get damaged, and if the software isn't up to date, it can be hacked and so on and so forth. And there were actually cases where people hacked the John Deere software that was up to date and shut down tractors, and just basically in order to prove that that argument was false. And then shortly afterwards, go figure, there were advertisements on the John Deere website stating that they were looking to hire security specialists immediately. Not you know, as quickly as you know, like they could apply, they wanted to hire you. And so the argument that it's, you know, for your own good or for your protection just kind of falls flat when immediately, you know, anybody can get inside and shut down the equipment.
Right. And I wanted to draw attention to this additional statement that shows how they've cut the number of dealerships nationwide by over half. So there's something, what would that be, like 45% or so, as many dealerships as there were in 96.
Damn.
And that's just like, that's bad for resiliency. And we that's a whole nother topic. But like when you like, you're not only putting mom and pop dealerships out and funneling more and more of that local economic productivity into the hands of like distant shareholders,
Mm-hmm.
instead of going to, you know, the local tractor repair shop in bumfuck wherever, and that, you know, repair shop then sponsoring the local little league, or you know, donating money to some kind of civic work, or generally just being a part of a community. Like now those farmers can't even keep their dollars circulating locally. Like it's just funneling money out, and farming communities are becoming more and more just like a plantation to be extracted.
The resiliency is an actually really good point. I mean, if we should have learned anything from our friendly neighborhood global pandemic, it was that we are at the whims of are at the whims of nature, when it comes to that. And so, like, yeah, I'm surprised more and more people haven't, in the government, haven't stepped up and pointed out that it's like a national security concern. If our food supply isn't taken care of, we can't very well claim to be secure.
Right. And I wouldn't rely on government to do much, although I would admit that the 2018 Farm Bill had a lot of really good stuff in it. As far as I know, I haven't like gone through the entire thing, but I know people who follow it more closely than I do, and they gave it a tacit endorsement. So I'm not saying that like the federal government and the USDA aren't doing anything. But certainly we saw with like the slaughterhouses, like
Mm-hmm.
there were like we weren't hip to it, but we talked to people who have a better relationship with the local USDA slaughter facilities, and they were buying pigs at like literally farmers were paying to have the pigs come out here to be slaughtered and losing money on it because then they were just flooding the market with cheap pigs. And so some people were able to pick up like whole hogs for pennies on the dollar. And that's just because they needed to do something with them. Because in agriculture, like it's not like a widget factory where they can be like, all right, we'll cut a work shift here and we'll slow the line down and produce less widgets.
Yeah,
Like,
these widgets die.
These widgets die. These widgets cost money to keep alive. Like, and then also like you're dependent on if like you can't be like, oh well, we're gonna ramp down production of corn. Like, well, I mean, we certainly could, and that's a whole nother conversation about like what we're doing, like what we grow and why we grow it. But I'm just saying that like you have to make a decision well in advance because it just takes time for the product to be produced, the plant to grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really subject to the same laws. And that's a discussion that I had recently. People talking about what is a free market and should there be a laissez-faire to agriculture? And I'm in the camp that absolutely fucking not. And then in fact I'm in the absolutely not camp in any economic sector, but in particularly agriculture.
Yeah. Well, the difference is if iPhones or widgets stop getting made, people don't die. Food stops getting made, that's called a famine.
That's true.
We made a special word for it.
You had a video you wanted to show, right?
No, shh, quiet. I did not. I don't have it queued up to the right point.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really just kind of a soft launch, so to speak.
Yeah. But I mean, back to some more of the actual right to repair and stuff. Something I found out about was something called latch codes, and they're currently used for things that are related to emission standards. And these are if you get the software from John Deere, it allows you to do a lot of stuff. It does allow you to troubleshoot, and it does allow you to reset a lot of the codes that pop up. However, what it won't let you do is get access to these latch codes. So basically, if one of these pops off, you have to go to a dealership or get one of the representatives to come to you, which can cost upwards of $150 an hour, travel included. And they're currently used for emission standards. But what is going on is that John Deere, in the terms of service, reserves the right to pretty much change the software and firmware as they please. And so by utilizing their very vague terms of service, it allows them to slowly creep in other aspects into these latch codes. And it basically makes it so that more and more is being covered by the latch codes. Like, oh, like you replaced an O2 sensor. Well, we have to have a certified technician come out and verify that those sensors are up to our standards. Sadly enough, like you can bypass these. A lot of the farmers talk about how they get gray market software out of. It's funny that Ukraine is a big proponent. They don't follow a lot of our copyright laws, and so they'll get a lot of stuff out of Ukraine, China, other places, and they will tinker with the firmware in order to basically get access to the customer service advisor or the ability to override these settings. But if they ever decide that, okay, I've done everything I can, I definitely need to go in to a dealership and get this serviced, the very first thing that the service technician does is updates the firmware and the software on the tractor. And so that'll overwrite all the stuff that they had. Now, I mean, they still have access to it as soon as they get it back. And currently, most dealerships are just kind of looking the other way. But at any given point, John Deere or the dealership or even, a government agency could step in and say that these modifications are being used to bypass emission standards. They need to be illegal. We need you to report anytime someone has unauthorized software or firmware. And at the very least, when you get back home, you have to redo all the changes. Yeah, and so it's a bit of a slow creep from necessary codes to stop you from basically bypassing emission standards to, you don't get to replace this part.
Yeah, and it kind of like right to repair for me kind of sits within that realm of like well, no shit, right? Like in a general, like I would say a very heavy hand needed in the realm of intellectual property. Like drug patents and all that other stuff. Dude, fucking movies and pop culture stuff. The way that like companies will like do just enough to be like, nope, it's still protected. We still own it. It's not public domain. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like Disney doing a live action Lion King because that way they can keep Lion King as a property, like in their private. It's as an intellectual property, it resets the clock instead of whatever the law is, which is like 99 years, I think.
Yeah.
Which is US has the most the most restrictive IP laws.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and Mickey Mouse has been in Disney's control forever, and I think they've made more than enough money off of him, and it should be released to the public at this point.
Yeah, I'm just amazed at it. And it, again, like we were talking about earlier, it's just this like movement towards where like the entire economy is now just like a fucking rent state. Like everything
it's basically
is rented,
feudalism.
like nothing. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
It is like feudalism in a lot of ways. Like it's feudalism for these guys, for these farmers that have John Deere tractors. Now, no one says you have to buy a John Deere tractor, but like the way that federal policy has gone and just general trends have been towards like you gotta get big. Like that was literally federal government policy was get big or get out. So like
right.
If these guys want to keep their land, like they have to get more competitive, and to be competitive, you need to buy the equipment that makes you competitive. So,
yeah, and most of the time they don't own the land. They're just renting. So
tenant farmers.
Yep.
Or service companies is what I mean. I'm just surprised how much farmland is owned by like just investment firms,
and
then these large service companies like exist to basically like manage it. So it's their land, but technically like everything they make belongs to someone else.
sounds about as American as you can get.
That's right. All right. Well, I think we've. Final point I wanted to make on this.
Okay.
Right to repair also for me fits within the realm of like the cradle to grave manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about environmental destruction or climate change and resource depletion and all of these issues, like right to repair just makes sense. It's like, why not try to get more mileage? Like, imagine instead of like the cash for clunkers, like Obama did in 08 or whatever.
Yeah, I remember
Like,
that.
imagine instead of just encouraging people to destroy things that were still functional, you just invested that money in building public transit. And it's like, all the embodied energy in those vehicles was just thrown away.
Mm-hmm.
What, like 30,000, 40, 50,000 auto manufacturers that could have just as easily like retooled the factories and kept their jobs building something else, like train cars or some shit like that. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Buses, like, electric buses for municipal transit systems.
it's not as easy as it sounds. Like retooling a factory line is a massive endeavor.
I'm aware of that, but
yeah, but it definitely would have been a better. It definitely would have been a better option than just trashing a whole bunch of vehicles.
right. And that's what and also the whole reason that program existed was like to try and keep those jobs. And all what I'm saying is that like we could keep those people employed doing other things.
Absolutely. Some of the videos that I watched, regarding right to repair, less specifically towards John Deere, but were that it was lobbyists, of course, and they were saying, oh well, we did surveys of people, and we found that in recent years, what is happening more often than not is that a device is being passed on to somebody else, and not ending up in the landfill, or not ending up being recycled. It's just being reused. And Louis Rossman, who's one of the primary proponents of right to repair, pointed out that can only happen for so long, because eventually no one's going to want an iPhone 4 or whatever, or the chip that regulates charging will die. The battery will be artificially limited by Apple updates or something along that line, and it's going to end up in his bin of parts that he saves until he has like 1,000 pounds of waste, and then he recycles it all at once. He's like, so while it may be true that things are being passed down, resold, reused, they're also still ending up in a pile somewhere waiting to be reclaimed. Like, you can't get over the fact that things become obsolete and no one wants to use them eventually. We've got two phones sitting waiting to be recycled, and where do we do it?
Yeah, VCRs. Probably there was a VCR in 80% of the households in the United States, and there's probably a handful of people that would want it for the novelty.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a super niche market. Like,
yeah, well, it's the same people that are same people that own vinyl.
yeah. Oh yeah. Vinyl has a different sound, so I can understand that, like an aesthetic quality to it. But a VHS tape, like, a little different. But yeah, I'm sure there's people with it that were like, oh my god, I had the biggest like indie porn collection of indie porn made in Pennsylvania and Maryland between 1985 and 1995 on VHS. So like, I still want a VHS player.
You gotta digitize that stuff, man.
But they should put it in the Library of Congress.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. When I was watching these videos and listening to the farmers and stuff like that, I was kind of reminded of my old job with check scanners, because it is a similar situation where, like, it's not as big as phones. There's only so many banks. The equipment's really specialized. It's really hard to get a hold of the software. But once you do get a hold of that software, it kind of opens up a whole different world in what you can do to affect the hardware. Like, you can change the behavior of a machine. You can find out that product segmentation is a real thing, and that's just basically where it's cheaper to create a whole bunch of the same motor, and then it's capable of some speed, but then you limit it artificially to only go at 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100%. And then you sell 4 different products that run at those 4 different speeds. And all that's stopping the low end 25% capable machine from being a 100% machine is the firmware. And so you can get a hold of the firmware for a top tier machine. You can then put it onto the low end machine, and suddenly you have a high end machine. And so over a period of years, we were basically able to get a hold of someone in the repair sector and convince them that we had a problem that could be solved by this software. They gave us the software to solve one problem, and I quickly learned that it could be used to solve a plethora of other problems, and made it so all of our machines were operating as top tier machines. And it cost me nothing, and it was all along the low end machines were low end because someone decided they were going to be. Now, it's not exactly the same as tractors, because as someone pointed out correctly, they're only meant to take a certain amount of strain. An axle can only take so much torque prior to braking, and generally they're only going to design that higher torque capacity into a more expensive machine. And so if you bypass torque limiters or something like that, you might just destroy your $500,000 machine, which is inadvisable. But yeah,
Right.
The idea of the product segmentation of the artificial limits is very real, and I think that's something that manufacturers don't want people to know, and so that's another reason to hide this software from everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty complicated. I generally, like, if it creates monopolies or supports monopolies, then it's bad. I have a pretty simple ethics.
Yeah. Well, for a while in the check scanner domain, there were 3 major corporations: Burroughs, Digital Check, and Canon, and then Panini to a lesser extent. And then Digital Check bought up Burroughs. And now there are 3, and Panini has a limited stock share, and so I'm pretty sure it's going to go away as well. And there was talk from Canon about ditching the entire line just because it wasn't as profitable as their printer
SLRs.
And camera line. Yeah, SLRs. And so they had so much more money from the other areas that they were thinking about just ditching the whole thing. Because why deal with something that's mechanical when you can just sell something that's entirely digital and not have to worry about repairs and whatnot? Yeah,
it's true.
And so heading towards a monopoly.
That's right. Well, that I think is a good place to leave it.
All right. Well, we have been with Thunderous Applause, a Star Wars themed podcast where we discuss a variety of topics. Today was John Deere. Next week,
and the right to repair.
Next week, I don't know.
Well, we'll figure it out.
We haven't planned that far.
We'll see you then, though.
All right.
Cue
Have a good
music.
Night.
You too, man.